Good morning. U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona will soon leave his post in Washington, where he has served since March of 2021. The secretary, a Connecticut native who also served as our state education commissioner, recently visited the Channel 3 studios, speaking with WFSB chief political reporter Susan Raff, who joins me now in Studio A. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. This is a big interview to get on his way out the door.
A big interview, you know, and none of us expected, you know, someone, a Connecticut native like Miguel Cardona, so it is very exciting. And he came to WFSB to sit down and talk with us for a good long time. And, you know, he looked back at his accomplishments, things that he feels the Biden administration did well. He also pointed out some snags along the way. Keep in mind, he came in during a pandemic, 2020. Most of our schools, or more than half, were closed. They opened them within 9 months. But there were other challenges, including FAFSA, and that's the program for federal aid. So let's take a listen and hear what he had to say about that.
We fixed access to higher education, and we made the process, as challenging as it was, federal student aid is more accessible to more students across the country now than ever before. And even in the year that we have a delay in rollout, 500,000 more students had access to higher education dollars from the federal government.
Right, the rollout was a big issue, I know. Is it better now? And what were some of the issues? I mean, your administration took a big hit for that.
Yeah, you know what though? It's a hit worth taking if it means you're opening doors to higher education. So for 40 years, that system was never touched. As a 17-year-old, I never filled out FAFSA. I didn't want to put that pressure on my parents. It was an hour-long application. And it was confusing. It was like doing your taxes. We turned it into a 15-minute process that's online, and the rollout was challenging because the system that we had at the Federal Department of Education hadn't been touched in 40 years. So while we were rebuilding it, we changed the systems. We got new people in. We brought in talent from outside of the agency. We got rid of some folks that were in positions that shouldn't have been there or weren't doing their jobs. And we fixed the system. And as I said, that same year, 500,000 more students had access. Today, we opened it up weeks ago, where close to 2 million students have already filled it out. So I'm excited about the potential in the future. And for me, fixing a broken FAFSA system is the baseline. It's like reopening schools. That's a baseline. We need to think higher. We need to think more and expect more. So my expectation now, Susan, is that FAFSA completion rates match graduation rates. In our country, we normalized 50% of the students filling out FAFSA, 60% of the students filling out FAFSA. What happens to the other kids? There's federal aid available. I expect now, across the country, that we get our numbers closer to 90%, 95% of our students. There are dollars there, it's a 15-minute process, and more students should have access to higher education.
Students are still struggling in school or not handing in their assignments, and people say, well, it was because of the pandemic.
You know, as a father of 2 teenagers during the pandemic, I can tell you without question, yes, there's still an impact. Talk to educators. They'll tell you skills that were developed during that period from 2020 to 2022-ish were missed. Socialization skills. I once talked to a teacher in New Jersey in 2021 who told me that when she got her first graders back, they didn't know that they could look to the left and look to the right to see their classmates because they were so used to looking at a screen. The socialization gaps, the studying gaps, you know, students were isolated for a long time, so just rebuilding those socialization skills took a lot of time. And we are seeing the impact. But I'm proud of what I'm seeing also. You know, places like Connecticut that already cut in half the chronic absenteeism rates. They're working closely to make sure that we're getting back to those pre-pandemic levels. But without question, yes. Another area that you know is the mental health of our students. We're in a youth mental health crisis in this country, which is why I'm proud that because of the work that we've done over the last 4 years, we have 16,000 more school counselors, school social workers, mental health providers to help support our students. Even before the pandemic, when I was commissioner here, I knew we had mental health needs in our schools that weren't being addressed. So we are providing additional supports. We have better systems in place, but the need is great. Just talk to any teenager, talk to any teacher, and they'll tell you that students, they're getting better, but there's still a need.
I know that part of the Biden administration, a big focus was to eliminate debt that college students had and to make it easier for kids to go to college. So, but does that really address the fact that college itself is just so expensive and out of reach for so many people? Yeah.
No, so a lot of attention has been given to the debt. But debt was only a small portion of what we're trying to do to fix a broken system. I often say, let's take a step back. Debt relief is a small part of it, an important part of it. Because the debt relief are for public servants, everyone that we called essential 4 years ago, right? Through bipartisan law that was passed in 2007, they were promised debt relief. The administration before us didn't do it. They created obstacles. We fixed it. We went after those colleges like ITT, Corinthian, that preyed on first-generation students. They took the benefits of veterans to pay for their school and provided a very poor quality education. So we went after these for-profit colleges that were preying on students. We provided debt relief to public servants that they were owed. And we provided debt relief to people with total and permanent disabilities.
So what's next for Miguel Cardona? He says his job will ultimately change, but the work, he says, will not. Education is in his blood, so he may stick with that. He has 2 teenagers and a wife who works as a school liaison in the Meriden public school system, and he's looking forward to being home for the holidays. He does have some advice for the Trump administration, and obviously Linda McMahon, who has been selected by Trump to be his successor. He says, be close to students. Go in the classroom, and that way you'll make better decisions in Washington.
It's interesting. He was on this show a couple years ago, and one of the questions I asked him was, did it benefit Connecticut that the education secretary was from Connecticut? Now we have a second education secretary from Connecticut, but with very different views. And President Trump has said he's thinking about defunding the whole operation. Did he talk to you about that at all?
He did, and he felt that in some way it is dangerous because he felt that defunding education and giving money to states means that vulnerable students may fall through the cracks, and that those students who really need the help won't get it. And yes, Linda McMahon, I don't think she's ultimately from or born in Connecticut, but obviously has a strong presence here. Very, very different. She supports privatizing a lot of schools, which is something that Miguel Cardona doesn't support, because he feels, again, that there are going to be winners and losers, and perhaps those vulnerable students, those students who need services, they simply won't get them.
So 2 people with Connecticut driver's licenses with very different views on education. Is that what you're telling me? All right, Susan Raff, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.